as ICE raids have been unfolding in major cities like Chicago and New York. The Trump administration has revoked temporary protected status for more than 600,000 Venezuelans in the United States.
600,000 people will soon have their protected status canceled, which means they could be eligible for deportation. And as the Trump administration ramps up ICE raids in sanctuary cities, many people living in places like New York are on edge, because in 45 days, they may need to be living somewhere else.
The prospect of more operations focused not just on violent criminals, but on the undocumented, has New York's immigrant population living in fear.
Homeland Security Secretary Kristi Noem called out former DHS Secretary Alejandro Mayorkas, accusing him of using temporary protected status, or TPS, as a loophole to let migrants stay here and violate the laws.
Definitely the fear is real.
Members of the notorious Tren de Aragua gang are increasingly drawn to sanctuary cities. It's Venezuela's largest criminal organization, linked to dozens of high-profile crimes in this country, like this apartment building takeover.
We're going to make our community safer by targeting those who are in the country legally that have criminal record. But if you force us into the community and not let us get the bad guy into jail, it means more collateral arrests, it means more non-criminals being arrested, because when we find the bad guy, which we will, there's going to be others with them.
So over 500,000 Venezuelans now have just a few weeks to figure out their plans, if they want to stay in America. But what none of the activists claiming that this is horrible news bother mentioning is that temporary protected status is just that. Temporary. And ICE doesn't have the personnel to deport everybody at once, which is why the border czar's made it clear he's prioritizing criminals and national security threats first, some of whom are here benefiting from federal deportation protection on the grounds that their home countries are so dangerous. With so much gang violence, nobody could live there safely. But the problem is the criminals and gang members that destroyed some of these places are now here benefiting from a status that protects them from what they did to the places they used to live, while making it impossible to remove them from this country. However, that's about to change, because in 45 days, federal rules that unknowingly help the wrong people hide in America will come to an end, about a year ahead of schedule, at which point everyone involved will have to decide whether to leave America on their own, apply for asylum, or hunker down in a sanctuary city like New York in violation of federal immigration law. An idea that gets riskier every single day as ICE raids continue across sanctuary cities at a pace nobody in this country thought was possible. Which brings us to the real reason activists and enemies of America's borders are so outraged by these recent decisions. Temporary protected status is a legal form of U.S. residency. The last administration kept extending that, and that, in combination with America's wide open borders, we now know was essentially being used to fast-track mass migration to our country at an unsustainable level. A situation that allowed gang members and criminals to embed themselves in communities all over America.
Authorities arrested 20 people wanted on criminal charges. The enforcement actions happened in Washington Heights, Queens, and the Bronx, and that's where authorities took into custody Anderson Zambrano Pacheco, the reputed Venezuelan gang member.
These gang members were all caught in New York City apartments that they used as bases to plan and commit crime all over town. Not exactly nice guys. And they do this while exploiting other immigrants, as this gang's specialty is human trafficking, which, as you're about to see, has made their presence in America an absolute disaster for everybody in every way imaginable.
You yourself have stated that if there is a Venezuelan migrant community in a neighborhood, then there's likely the Tren de Aragua gang. Why?
Yes, ma'am, because instead of building their enterprise off of narcotics like a lot of other gangs, they built their entire enterprise off the backs of over 8 million Venezuelans fleeing Venezuela and other countries in South America.
So it's important to understand that the only reason these guys are even here is because starting in 2023, America's front door was wide open, and these guys came here posing as asylum seekers, fleeing exactly what it was that created most of this crisis to begin with, at least as far as Venezuela is concerned. But because of temporary protected status, some of these criminals, even if their asylum claim gets denied, they're still able to reside in the country and live here and work here. They can even get a normal job because TPS gives work authorization. But that's not what they're here for. Instead, they've come here to commit as much crime as possible, hitting levels that were not possible in Venezuela, where they're from. And their ideas, their dreams, they're not the American dream at all, that's for sure.
And once the Tren de Aragua establishes a cell within a community, What's their end game? What happens next?
Their end game really is to govern and control that area. So they're going to seize areas, they're going to seize apartments, they're going to seize abandoned buildings, they're going to take over the migrant care centers, and their whole goal is to infiltrate themselves within the criminal underworld in that local area.
Something they're doing in parts of New York right now. If you walk around in Jackson Heights, Queens, you'll see flea markets set up on random sidewalks full of stolen goods. And we've had recent robbery patterns in Midtown Manhattan and in Central Park, which were traced back to these very criminals, some of whom were living in city-funded asylum shelters. But that's about to change because, as you're about to see, these gang members, they're no longer going to have this blanket protection, this temporary protected status that allows them to stay here when they shouldn't even be in the country to begin with.
The Trump administration has revoked temporary protected status for more than 600,000 Venezuelans in the United States, implemented by the Biden administration. TPS is a federal program that allows people from certain countries to live and work in the U.S. when it's deemed unsafe to return to their home country.
Why would it be unsafe to return to their home country? Well, it's because of what these gang members did, and these guys are now here benefiting from what they did back home. That doesn't make any sense. And by protecting these criminals and treating them as victims of what they've already done, we've just enabled them, especially in sanctuary cities like New York, where in some cases we've moved these individuals into family-focused asylum shelters that have little kids and school-aged children there, who are now living down the hall from gang members who may be trying to recruit them or worse. But apparently the open U.S. border, that was such a huge opportunity for these Venezuelan gang members that it may have actually changed Venezuela forever. Why is Venezuela's crime rate falling? Well, it says right here, there's a major link between mass criminal migration and decreased crime over there. And it says right here that the economy is so bad, criminals can't commit the same crime that they used to, which is why these criminals had to come here. This is a place, America, where they can commit all kinds of crime that a lot of us, and especially our leaders in places like New York, were just totally unprepared for.
The rollback means federal agents can now review all individuals who receive TPS, including members of the notorious Venezuelan gang Tren de Aragua. Noem also pointed to overwhelming public support.
Okay, so here's the thing. These gang members, they come here, they say that they're seeking asylum, but of course, they're not going to qualify because they're gang members. They might be dangerous. And ironically, because Venezuela is now safer and the humanitarian crisis down there is dying down, it's not really such a heartless thing to cancel temporary protected status when the protected status no longer even needs to apply. And the country is taking back people who are known gang members. This is something that people never thought was going to happen. Venezuela said, we don't want to take these people back. And they refused for quite some time, but now they are. And if people are extremely dangerous, too dangerous to be sent back to Venezuela because they could escape custody there and come back to America, the Trump administration wants to hold them in facilities like Guantanamo Bay, which to some people might sound really extreme, but you've got to understand, this gang, they didn't just use sanctuary cities like New York and places in Colorado to export crime to other areas of our country. They were actually using the protection we were giving them here to re-export crime to the entire world.
Authorities say the alleged gang members were trafficking guns not only throughout New York City, but as far as Texas and Colorado, with plans to expand their network to Colombia.
Ooh.
The DA says this was a years-long investigation. 34 guns were recovered, including 4 semi-automatic.
So these guys were stockpiling weapons in their apartment. They were using those weapons to arm local criminals here in New York. They were going to send them across the country, and then they were going to send them to other countries. These guys were definitely not here for the American dream, that's for sure. But look at this. What they did come here for was to recruit new members. It says it right here, inside shelters in places like New York. And look at this. Here's a map. They came from Venezuela, and then they almost exclusively went to places where they knew they would be protected legally from deportation. Protection which they're still getting, by the way, in places like New York, because as a sanctuary city, we do not cooperate with the federal government when it comes to immigration matters. Police are banned from turning people over to them. Yet even though we know we've got these gang members living in some of our asylum shelters, as a sanctuary city, you've still got a massive number of people here who want to advocate on behalf of these gang members. They are so upset that ICE is going into apartments and pulling these people out of their communities where they've embedded themselves, where they're committing crime, crime and making these communities safer. For some reason, people here are really upset about that. And they are super upset with New York City's mayor for cooperating with the federal government.
Stephen, Natasha, this memo went out to all city agencies, including schools, hospitals, and migrant shelters. And it tells these city employees that they can allow federal immigration officers onto city property if they, quote, feel reasonably threatened. The memo also warned that actively harboring or shielding an undocumented immigrant is a federal crime.
Yes, it is. You could get arrested if you go and do that. If you're going to block federal agents who have a warrant or need to go into a building to arrest somebody who's dangerous, if you stop them from going in there, you could be arrested. And if the mayor tells people to stand up to federal agents, he's now harboring criminals and he could be arrested. The border czar's already said that he's going to go after sanctuary city mayors who refuse to cooperate. But the situation in New York's really weird because here we've got a mayor who understands that gang members and criminals are a public safety problem. He wants to get rid of them, but now he's in trouble with the city council who doesn't want any of that. They want a leader here in New York to say that we are a sanctuary city, we are part of a resistance movement, and we're not going to cooperate and we're going to stand up to ICE. That's what they want. But look at this. You know who's very excited about these ICE raids? Parents of asylum seeker kids who live in shelters. This is somebody who lives at the Roosevelt Hotel. This is a hotel where we know there are gang members living in here. Look, here are photos of them. They call themselves Diablos de la 42. They live in the Roosevelt Hotel. It says it right here. And these parents have no idea how this is allowed to happen. She is worried her sons will be pulled into gangs sprouting up in this place. And you know what? These deportations, these raids, they are not a threat to people who have a pending asylum case and were granted parole in the United States while they wait for that case to play out. Those folks, as long as they don't commit a crime, they've got nothing to worry about. But now the New York City resistance movement is gearing up to do everything they can to stop any action that would remove people from the country who aren't supposed to be here.
So this memo is the first time we're seeing anything that provides something different, that gives additional leeway and kind of advertises a way for ICE to get in if they want to. And that's what's causing the panic.
Advertises a way for ICE to get in, telling city employees not to stand up to armed federal agents, advertises a way for ICE to get in. That's ridiculous. But one fascinating development here is that there has already been resistance towards local law enforcement crackdowns targeting these gang members inside the very shelters where we know they're residing. Here is a photo of the tent shelters at Randall's Island. These are in the process of being shut down, but we know that there's gang members living in there. There have been for quite some time. And the NYPD came here to raid this place, but you know what happened? Investigators believe private security guards tipped off people that were in the shelter that the NYPD was on the way. So the guards told them that the cops were on the way there, which would now be a federal crime. If the new border czar catches you doing that, he's going to put you in jail. And it looks like at the local level in New York, there is either no willpower or no law that would stop someone from aiding or embedding criminals who are here or impeding a police investigation. And some of our leaders are upset about all of this ICE activity, and they want the mayor to take a stronger stance against it because they do not like the idea of collateral arrests. If a gang member is located in an apartment and he's living with other people, they don't like the idea that everybody who's here unlawfully gets arrested. They're not interested in finding out why there's other people living with gang members. They don't care about that. They're just upset that somebody got arrested who wasn't a gang member.
The collateral arrests happen when we're looking for the bad guy and we find others with them. And we have told ICE officers they're going to enforce the law. Unlike the last administration, we're not telling ICE agents, ignore the oath you took, ignore the immigration law. Your immigration officers enforce those laws.
The big question here to me is, why are there people living in an apartment with gang members? Why does a gang member feel safe being around the people that they're located with? These are the questions we need to ask because those people very well may be connected to that gang member. They might be gang members that we just don't know about yet. We know that Tren de Aragua is here to grow their criminal empire, to recruit new people. This guy right here is one of the Tren de Aragua ringleaders from that Colorado apartment raid. And look at this. He was living in an apartment building in the Bronx across from a school. He's apparently this guy right here in the red. That's supposed to be him. We know he came to New York after the Colorado apartment raid. Why did he feel safe here? And why did other people feel safe with him? He had weapons inside the apartment that he was caught with. How come they were okay with living with somebody in an apartment where there were weapons? And you know something? This reveals that this whole issue of collateral arrests is actually a non-issue when you look at how these collateral arrests happen. One person person is being sought out. They are found with others. Anyone who's with them who's also here illegally, yes, they're also arrested because that's immigration law. But look at how badly the mainstream media wants to get the border czar to say that these raids are really about rounding up everybody no matter who they are, which isn't the case.
Good enough. We need to find these people and take them off the street.
You talk about taking down the violent criminals, the gang members, but then the illegal immigrants at places like the car washes and other businesses.
Well, I think I said from day one, the president's been clear, we're concentrating on public safety threats and national security threats. But if you're in the country legally, you're not off the table, but you're not going to be a priority. But I'm sure at the car wash, I'm not familiar with that operation, but I'm sure they're looking for a criminal, and they didn't find, they found others. But worksite enforcement's coming back.
So they need to go to these businesses to find people who they get a tip or who they know might be there. And if they show up at one of these places, whether the person's there, whether the person's not there, they had a reason to go. They know that they've entered the environment where that criminal, where that dangerous gang member is. And let's say you're here. Let's say you're in the country and you're not supposed to be here. Well, the best thing that you could do would be to separate yourself from these dangerous criminals who are armed, who ICE might be coming after. Because the best way to guarantee that ICE does not come to your business looking for a dangerous criminal is to not work with one. Simple as that. Then you don't have to be afraid if you're going to work because ICE is only after the criminals. And the reason that this is important is because it makes these criminals toxic to pretty much everybody. You do not want to be around gang members because gang members are now a magnet for law enforcement. But what do you think about 600,000 people losing their temporary protected status over the next few weeks? And why do you think that people are so upset that this temporary status is ending? It was temporary. It was going to end anyways. Thank you so much for watching. I will see you in the next video.